To order. Today, we are meeting on two measures. The first is HR 1836, a bill that recognizes the evolving role of the National Guard and Reserves. Members are on the front lines of the COVID pandemic, respond to natural disasters, and even protect the Capitol building. They often serve side by side with their active duty counterparts and take the same risks. Yet an outdated provision in the GI Bill treats their service differently, impacting their ability to get full benefits of this law. The Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parody Act will change that so we fully honor the service of our National Guard and Reserve members when it comes to their GI benefits. Second is HR 4673. More than 200,000 service members transition out of the military service every year. The first year of that transition is a critical time, with veterans facing a variety of healthcare needs. Right now, many unfortunately have to deal with bureaucratic red tape to get the care they need. The EventID Act will change that so these heroes no longer have to jump through unnecessary hoops to access the health care services that they have earned. Helping reservists and ensuring our veterans have access to health care sound pretty good to me. So it is my hope that this bill gets bipartisan support. And before I yield to the distinguished gentleman from Oklahoma, I also want to take this moment to say that I saw on social media with unfortunately, well, let's put it, I'm not particularly happy to have hear that our good friend from Colorado, Mr. Perlmutter, has said that he decided he's not going to run for re-election again. And I say that notwithstanding the fact that I'm sure that he's got many other things that he wants to pursue, and I'm sure that he's got a family that he wants to spend more time with, and maybe there may be other things he wants to run for. But I have to say that I was really sad to hear that news, because I, like everybody on this committee, appreciate his passion, his intellect, and his determination when it comes to serving his constituents and fighting for trying to make this country a better place. And I just hope that serving on this committee didn't scare him from wanting to run for another term. But we're going to miss him.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I yield to the gentleman.
Yeah, I stepped away for a second, and if you were saying nice things, can you repeat them?
Now you're asking too much.
No, I just thank you. Yeah, no, I don't want to get emotional here. I mean, obviously, the job we do is important. The people are wonderful. I just decided that it was time for me, and that I wanted to leave when I still loved the job and people still liked me. And that's really the bottom line. And I just appreciate all the kind words you said, even those that I didn't hear. And I'll yield back to the chair.
Well, we still have a full year, and judging from some of the things that we're going to have to deal with, it may seem like 10 years that you will still be with us. But seriously, as somebody who's been here for a while, we have colleagues on both sides of the aisle who I think distinguish themselves, not only the way they conduct themselves with other members, but the way they fight for their constituents, and they bring honor to this institution. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that we put you in that category, and that's why we hate to see you go. And so I left you a message, but I can't repeat what's in the message because of the profanity that was in that message. But the bottom line is, and we'll have more to say in months to come. But I just want you to know how much we admire and respect and love you, and it's, again, there's life after Congress, and there's lots of other things to do. But I think kind of selfishly for a lot of us, we just hate the prospect of seeing you not on this committee. But with that, let me yield to my good friend from Oklahoma, the ranking member, Mr. Cole, for any comments he wishes to make, and let me welcome everybody back. I hope everyone had a good holiday break and a good New Year's, and I yield to Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me associate myself with your remarks about our good friend from Colorado. I will say some nice things. I didn't think anybody would ever persuade me to vote for marijuana reform legislation, but my friend from Colorado did. And he genuinely is a wonderful member of our body and this committee. And I wish he had consulted with you and gotten your permission, because I know it would have been an emphatic no. You're not allowed to put your life ahead of service to this committee and to Congress.
I'm not getting any sound, and I can't figure out why.
Okay, let me.
Well, we could hear you, Jamie.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, you want me to hold, Mr. Chairman, or just proceed?
Let me see. Why don't you proceed? Good.
Okay, because I'm going to say a couple more nice things about Perlmutter. So just as good if Raskins doesn't hear any of that. But again, my friend has been a really good member and a really good friend, and somebody that honestly will be missed on both sides of the aisle. And so, I don't know when filing is, but if you have a road to Damascus experience and want to reconsider, I think that would be a very good thing for the Congress of the United States and the people of Colorado. Let me also, on another personal note, before I get to my formal remarks, Mr. Chairman, wish our good friend, your staff director, I understand it's Mr. Sisson's birthday. Nobody on my staff knows how old he is. I think since I'm the oldest member of this committee, I have a right to demand how old he is. But again, great staff member, and one that is appreciated by members on both sides. So we wish him many happy returns. I know he would want to spend his birthday with all of us. But nobody serves this committee and the Congress of the United States any better than our friend, your staff director, Mr. Sisson. And so we wish him many happy returns. With that, Mr. Chairman, our hearing today covers two items, both of which come out of the Veterans Affairs Committee. In short, H.R. 1836 extends GI Bill education benefits to Guard and Reserve members in certain circumstances, while H.R. 4673 requires the Department of Veterans Affairs to auto-enroll veterans in VA health care upon separation from the Department of Defense. While I believe the intentions behind both these bills are good, I understand that Republicans on the Veterans Affairs Committee have some concerns, particularly over the impact of both bills, which is largely unknown. And I look forward to hearing Ranking Member Boss' views during our discussion today. Before I yield back, I would like to take a moment to remind the committee of a pressing matter that's not before us today, the stalled process for finishing a final FY 2022 spending bill. It's been almost a month since we last met, and yet today Congress is no closer to meeting the deadline of finishing this spending package prior to the February 8th deadline. Let me make it clear that I have no criticism of my fellow appropriators on both sides of the aisle, and certainly our chairwoman, distinguished lady from Connecticut, Ms. Dolores. She's worked really hard trying to push toward an agreement. I chatted with her actually earlier this morning and before the break, and nobody's more dedicated. And again, while I certainly wasn't happy with what's in all the appropriations bills that we passed, I do point out for the record, the House did pass all 12 bills out of committee, 9 of them across the floor. So the problem has not been in our chamber. And frankly, our chairwoman has pushed hard actually to have shorter deadlines to try and encourage negotiation and push forward toward a deal. So I know she'll continue to do that. But I challenge, honestly, the administration, the leadership of both parties, but my friends in the majority currently do control both houses of Congress and the presidency, and that puts the responsibility to govern squarely on their shoulders. But rather than focusing on the key governance responsibility of funding the government and keeping it open, majorities instead chasing other partisan priorities that stand little chance of becoming law. Although it sometimes seems these priorities change on a day-to-day basis, as of today, my friends are still seeking a renewal of their reconciliation bill, a spending boondoggle that appears to have been consigned to history due to the opposition of a key Democratic senator. a federal government takeover of the voting process and even the erosion of the filibuster, a tool that Democrats championed and defended in the very recent past. Unfortunately, in constantly running between one shiny object and the next, the majority is abrogating its critical responsibilities. Mr. Chairman, at the end of the day, the final appropriations deal can only come about when there's a bipartisan and bicameral agreement. The majority must enter into real negotiations with Republicans. That will require a give and take and will necessitate changes from the majority's initial stance. Again, I add that I know my friend and distinguished colleague, Chairwoman Delora, is up to that task because I've done it with her myself before in the past. So I don't think the appropriators are the problem, but I do think leadership has to focus on this and the administration has to do it. Otherwise, we're going to slide toward a year-long CR, in my view. The Hyde Amendment and other bipartisan pro-life protections that have been included in appropriations bills for decades, honestly, must be restored, and indeed, no deal is possible without that. There's an overwhelming bipartisan support for an increase in defense spending to correspond to this year's bipartisan NDAA, or perhaps some other figure given the inflation that we're experiencing right now. And in countless other areas, there will have to be some give and take. None of that's possible until the majority puts its focus where it belongs. We now have 6 weeks until the current CR runs out. I hope my friends in the majority will put this time to good use. I know that they'll find willing partners in a serious negotiation on our side of the aisle, but I think it's time that that begins. So with that, Mr. Chairman, again, want to end with a positive note. I appreciate what you had to say about Mr. Perlmutter. He's a good friend, would be a real loss to Congress. And again, want to wish our good friend who serves this committee so well, your staff director, Mr. Sisson, a very, very happy birthday. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Well, thank you. The gentleman yields back. And let me also, I neglected to wish Don Sisson a happy birthday at the beginning because I was so overcome with emotion about Mr. Perlmutter's departure that I couldn't think of anything else. But Mr. Sisson tells me that he's at least 30. So I don't know if that helps you. But in any event, I want to
hoping now since I'm 72, I was hoping I was no more than twice as old as him. So hopefully he's at least in his mid-30s, maybe even approaching the big 40. So.
I will follow up with you on that. But in any event, I'd like to welcome our witnesses to provide testimony in HR 1836, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parody Act of 2021, and HR 4673, the eVest Act. Chairman Ticcato and Ranking Member Bost, we're delighted that you are here. Without any objection, any written materials you submit to rules documents at mail.house.gov before the conclusion of this hearing will be entered into the record. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Chairman Ticcato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if you'll indulge me, I just want to say a few good things about my friend, Mr. Perlmutter, the gentleman from Colorado. Let me just say that Ranking Member Cole, that Mr. Perlmutter showed no mercy to even his own president when speaking truth to power. My first experience as a freshman was observing, or actually watching with amazement, Mr. Perlmutter stand up to the president in a caucus meeting and tell him that his choice for Treasury Secretary was a bad idea, whereupon the president was quite, let's say he was triggered by Mr. Perlmutter. So let it be known that the gentleman from Colorado spoke truth to power no matter who it was, including his own president. I had a great time with him during oversight in science, and he was a tremendous resource when we had issues with the construction of the Denver VA. And there's so many other examples of his excellent legislative and lawyerly background and skill. So you will be missed, Mr. Perlmutter. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for indulging me. But I know in rules we've got to be mindful of getting to the point here. So I want to thank you and good afternoon, Chairman McGovern and Ranking Member Cole. I'm here today in support of HR 1836, Representative Levin's Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parody Act of 2021. Now, this bill is a long-needed fix to the unequal treatment of Guard and Reservists for GI Bill purposes. Under current law, Guard and Reservists do not accrue education benefits the same as their active duty counterparts, even when they are carrying out the very same duties. Now, we live in a new age of national defense where we utilize the total force concept with an operational reserve component, not a strategic reserve. I want to repeat, we now operate with an operational reserve component, not a strategic reserve. Now, what does that mean? It means that, in so many words, that our guards, that our guard units and reservists are called up far, far more than they have in the recent decades. I remember as a young boy, in the sort of closing days of the Vietnam War, that the Guard was thought of as a kind of as a safe haven. As we know, most Americans know that since 9/11, the Guard and Reserve are not safe havens. We've seen the Guard and Reserve called up into action, sometimes multiple times. Now, as we observe the anniversary of the January 6th attack on the Capitol last week, we were reminded of the Guard and Reserve troops who deployed to protect Congress and our staffs and the foundation of our democracy. We continue to rely on the strategic reserve throughout the COVID-19 pandemic to activate and support public health response efforts throughout the United States. It is time that the Guard and Reserve benefits reflect the key work they are doing and the need for equity across the total force. It is time for every day in uniform to count. The GI Bill is both a recruitment and transition benefit to help service members reintegrate in civilian life and close the opportunity gap with their civilian peers. Guard and Reserve need this more than ever as they are constantly transitioning between military, civilian employment, and family life and facing continuous disruptions. Now, if service members can step up and do their part day in and day out while holding down civilian jobs and squeezing in time to take care of their families, and veterans are finding this, and veterans are funding this, then the least we can do here in Congress is to get out of the way of the solution. Now, besides being the right thing to do, investing in equitable GI Bill benefits for Guard and Reservists will provide more than a tenfold return for our country. Who are we to stand in the way of an educational benefit that will only make our country stronger? This legislation is endorsed by numerous VSOs, including Student Veterans of America, National Guard Association of the United States, Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States, and Reserve Officers of America. So I wish to thank Chairman McGovern and Ranking Member Cole for considering this legislation in Rules Committee today, and I urge the rest of my colleagues to support this legislation to ensure every day a Guard or Reservist spends in uniform counts toward earning GI Bill benefits. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member Boss. We're delighted you're here. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman McGovern and Ranking Member Cole. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm here as the ranking member of the VA committee to discuss my opposition to H.R. 1836 as amended and the Guard Reserve GI Bill Parody Act of 2021 and H.R. 4673, the Ensuring Veterans Smooth Transition or EVEST Act. The intent of these bills is to improve delivery of benefits for members of the National Guard and Reserve for those transitioning out of the military. Those are goals I support. However, these bills have serious problems that I believe could jeopardize the services for veterans and harm taxpayers. As a result, I am unable to support them. The Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act would allow members of the National Guard and Reserve to accrue active duty service towards the GI Bill for every day they are in uniform on federal orders, including training. This bill will cost tens of billions of dollars over several decades. That is not fully offset because the costliness provisions of the legislation occur outside of the 10-year budget window for mandatory spending. This is yet another example of reckless spending. It is unacceptable to me. It is also unacceptable to Budget Committee Ranking Member Smith, who is sharing my concerns about the fiscal irresponsibility of this proposal. A small portion of this bill is offset. However, it is offset using one of the very few pay-fors available to the VA committee. We have been holding those offsets in reserve while looking to expand services to toxic exposed veterans, which CBO estimates could cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Chairman Takano and I have agreed to address the toxic exposure issue as our highest priority. It baffles me that we would compromise that goal by taking this critical offset off the table. HR 4673, the eVest Act, would automatically enroll eligibility separating service members into the VA healthcare system. Transitioning service members receive education before they leave the military about how to enroll in the VA care and are contacted by the VA 3 times during their first year as civilians. Automatic enrollment and automatically enrolling them would add an influx of new patients into the VA healthcare system, which could mean veterans wait longer for care, VA staff experience more stress, and VA facilities become more crowded. None of these second-order impacts have been considered or accounted for. Further, CBO estimates this bill will cost $3.1 billion. That is not offset, which means that taxpayers will also suffer from this proposal. Neither of these bills have had a legislative hearing. That means that we do not have views or cost estimates on either of them from the VA or other stakeholders. As the saying goes, this is no way to run a railroad. I've offered an amendment today to address my concerns with these bills and accomplish their goals in a more measured, budget-friendly, and veteran-centered manner. Congressman Moore's and my amendment to Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parody Act would grant GI Bill eligibility for those performing services on federal orders for missions other than training. CBO estimates that the amendment would cost about $16 million, which would be fully offset. That is a stark contrast to the nearly $2 billion cost of the underlying bill, not to mention the cascading cost in the outlying years. My amendment in the eVest Act would create a bipartisan commission to improve eligibility for VA care for all veterans, not just those transitioning. I hope my amendments will be made in order. I'm happy to answer any questions about these, and I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to go back to Mr. Takano because I think he neglected to address HR 4673. So we'll give him an opportunity to finish his testimony.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I cut short my testimony and I appreciate the opportunity to complete it. I'm also here in support of my bill, HR 4673, the Ensuring Veterans Smooth Transition, or EVEST Act. That's the second of the 2 bills that I'm advocating for today before the committee. I have, as you know, I've made suicide prevention a top priority for the House Veterans Affairs Committee. In last Congress, we passed bipartisan, bicameral mental health legislation packages, including the Commander John Scott Hannon Veterans Mental Health Improvement Act and the Veterans Compact Act. Now, earlier this year, we passed the Sergeant Ketchum Rural Veterans Mental Health Act, but there's always more work to be done. Now, my bill builds on our work and finally closes one of the most glaring gaps for veterans being able to successfully access high-quality VA health services. It's the enrollment process. We know that the months following transition out of the military can be very stressful and are particularly risky for new veterans in terms of mental health. With the eVest Act, service members will be automatically enrolled in VA care during the transition out of the military, with the choice to opt out of VA care rather than having to opt in later and attempt to navigate a new bureaucracy on their own. A smooth transition from DoD to VA can help support veterans adjust to the next phase in their lives and provide easy access to healthcare should challenges arise. Now, we know that veterans are much more likely to use VA services and care when the process is simple. And we know that VA care is world-class. Automatic enrollment is something policymakers and VA service and veteran service organizations have been trying to advance for years. And with eVest, it will finally become a reality. Now, I wish to thank Chairman McGovern again and Ranking Member Cole for considering this legislation in the Rules Committee today. And I urge the rest of my colleagues to support this legislation to increase access to care and ensure a smooth transition to civilian life for veterans. And I yield back.
Thank you very much. And without objection, I want to ask unanimous consent to assert a statement from Representative Hayes into the record in support of her amendment to HR 4673. I have no questions. I'll turn it over to Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just actually have a couple of questions. First, Chairman Decano, Mr. Boss made an interesting point, which I was unaware of, that this legislation had not been considered in full committee. Is there any particular reason why that wasn't done? Because again, the idea of allowing the VA to offer testimony and that sort of thing, get it from the other stakeholders, I think would actually strengthen the prospects, because conceptually, there's a lot of good things in this legislation, no question about it.
Well, let me just say, the bill 1836 regarding the Guard and Reserve Parity Act has been public for more than 2 years. In fact, the committee held a Guard and Reserve only benefits hearing just over a year ago to review the disparity of these benefits. We have worked closely with stakeholders and the minority to ensure that the bill achieves what it aims to do. We've also worked closely with DoD and VA to ensure that all Guard and Reserve members are covered. Now, regarding eVest, HR 4673, eVest was first introduced in the 116th Congress and went through a legislative hearing as part of the original Compact Act in September 2020. It was actually part of the Compact Act. It was part of a larger package of bills. VA declined to appear and testify at that hearing, that legislative hearing, which focused on suicide prevention bills and provided an inappropriately brief 2 pages total written technical assistance document that did not even address eVest. I introduced the bill again in July of 2021, and it was marked up by the full committee at the end of July, and it was favorably reported out of committee. There have been multiple opportunities for minority input. The VSOs are supportive of this bill, and VA itself has long sought auto-enrollment capacity and authority. So I fail to see where the full committee has not considered both bills with adequate time for the minority to have input.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Mr. Boss now. And number one, if you'd respond to that, but I'm not sure the language is the same as what the committee considered before. So I'd like that question addressed. And then second, Mr. Boss, if your amendments were made in order and accepted, would you feel comfortable then supporting the legislation?
In answer to your first question and responding to the chairman, as mentioned, it was done in another Congress. And all of us know that probably the membership and on the VA committee would like to have had input from the VA, from other stakeholders involved, from this Congress, not previous Congresses. Now, I understand that we always are working on bills as we go forward and everything like that, but it is a process that we need to respect our other members who might be new freshman members so they can have that input as well, not depend on conversations that took place in other conferences. But in answer to your second question, yes, those amendments that we have moved forward puts it in place. Look, all of us want to provide these benefits to our veterans. We really do. And we want to make sure that they're provided in a way that they don't take away from other veterans and take away from the services that they're receiving in other areas. I believe that there's conversation right now in a bicameral manner, from what I understand, on what we're going on right now, especially with our Guard and Reserve. Our Guard and Reserve we can keep the cost down at a sensible level by accepting the amendment, and then go ahead and provide those services, and they can be credited for those times when they are actually called into active duty by orders, but not necessarily for the training. As an active veteran, whenever I was an active military person, you knew when you signed the papers that the training and everything like that did not count towards your time in service. But if you were called up, then it should count towards the time in service. There's a difference between reserves, guards and reserves, and active military personnel. And so that's why we should also, and answer to your question, yes, if we put these amendments in, it becomes affordable and we can still provide those services.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Yeah, thank you. And just for the record, I think that the amendment that we're referring to that Mr. Voss submitted, we're being told is not germane. So I just point that out for the record. Ms. Torres.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, that's one of the two is not germane, correct?
Excuse me, I didn't hear you.
Which amendment is not germane, because we're two amendments we're talking about.
The one to HR 467.
4673.
Yeah, 4673, I'm sorry.
Right. Okay.
Number 12 on our sheet here. Mrs. Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say that it is really disappointing to hear that we would try to deny anyone, but especially our veterans, an opportunity to gain seniority, job status, and also earn retirement credits and benefit credits while in training. I mean, the only people that I know that don't get paid for going through training are members of Congress, and that's where it should stay. That is an ill-conceived policy. It is so regrettable that we're talking about denying veterans, our military, for going through training to get them combat ready. Chairman Takano, can you please address the issue of not going through or not having a hearing through committee? I just want to say to you, Mr. Chairman, that it's getting old to hear that again over and over and over again from Republicans, and there is a process. We have committees, and there is a process, to bring legislation to the floor. And I'd like for you to explain that process that this bill went through, other than last Congress.
Well, my colleague, let me just say that it's been a common practice of this committee and many committees. Once bills have been heard and they've been in the public domain, that we can bring it to the floor if we've publicly aired the bill in a previous Congress. A good example of this would be the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act, which was a major piece of legislation that was actually signed by President Trump. I introduced it in the last Congress after it had been previously introduced in the 4 previous Congresses. And in fact, Chairman Rowe in the prior Congress had carried the bill and was very disappointed that 2 senators held it up at the 11th hour. Let me say that we didn't take Blue Water Navy through another set of hearings. I introduced it, one of the first bills I introduced in the last Congress, and forthwith it was a bill that passed by overwhelming bipartisan support. There are plenty of other examples of bills that are pretty much in the public domain because we have sunshined them. They have been through committee. I would say that that eVest was actually part of an entire piece of legislation. It was part of the Compact Act was later taken out during conference. But it was a bill that passed committee in very much the same language. So as far as the opportunity for stakeholders, the opportunity for the minority party, opportunity for the public to have input, I don't see that there's anything here that goes against common and strong legislative practice.
I appreciate your response, Chairman. However, you're still talking about last Congress. And I guess, my next comment is directed to the Chairman of the Rules Committee. We need to have a real conversation around, these priorities of bringing bills that haven't gone through a committee hearing in this Congress. Some of this legislation, like what we have before us, I support 100%. But there has to be a process. We're not talking about, voting on a budget on those key bills, to fund the government. We're never going to get consensus from Republicans. They are intent on killing every single piece of good legislation that comes through. But that doesn't mean that we negate our responsibility to the Congress that was duly elected in this Congress. And with that, I support these bills. It's disappointing that we're having this conversation, and I yield back.
Thank you. Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would just point out for the record, there are 64 members of Congress in this session or this term that were not in Congress in the previous Congress. And that's the reason why, Mr. Chairman, I believe you said at the start of this Congress that after an initial 3-month hiatus where we would have to consider things that perhaps hadn't been through regular order, now we were in a realm where everything would be considered under regular order. And I know the chairman of my primary committee, Energy and Commerce, Chairman Pallone, has insisted that all bills come through the formal committee process for the very reasons that the gentlelady from California just articulated, that there is an opportunity for every member, now new members, to participate, and of course, opportunities for the public to be able to see the legislation and be transparent about the process. So let's not discount the fact, I don't disagree with Chairman Takano that the concepts are good. And goodness knows that when Republicans were in the majority, there were times where we did the very same thing, but we were also criticized each and every time by the then minority Democrats for abrogating the committee process. And as one who believes himself to be an institutionalist, I don't think we should turn our backs on the fact that our committees do real work. Our members are all valuable. Their voices should be heard. And it is important to bring things through regular order. Now, Mr. Bost, having said all of that, I would like to be in agreement with you. And I accept the fact that you said that the difficulty is obviously in the offset because it's outside the 10-year budgetary window. And being a member of the Budget Committee, I'm sensitive to that. At the same time, when we look at the problem with suicides amongst our veterans, and particularly suicides amongst our Guard and Reserve personnel, it's pretty hard to be arguing about dollars when we see those types of really disturbing statistics. So can you help me with that? Are there places where we are trying to apply lessons learned from the past? Goodness knows, after 20 years of war, we probably have learned some things, but how do we justify arguing from a budgetary position when in fact there are lives being lost?
All of us, as I said earlier, thank you for the question. All of us, as I said earlier, want to see these, and I'm sorry that previous speaker brought up the fact that thinking that we don't care about the veterans. I myself am a veteran. I am the father of a veteran. I'm the grandfather of a veteran. And we want to make sure But we have to make sure that as we provide, we're doing it in a way that we can do it in the future as well. Right now, when we move forward with the dollar amounts that we're talking about here, they can get the one bill, they can get the benefits, okay, the benefits for the GI Bill, and they can get credit for actually being called up. But for training is something that has been in existence since, it's that difference between reserve and guard and active. And the training is what we're talking about. And that slight difference can make a big difference as far as the budgetary process. And when we do this, we're also saying that we're going to take money away from other areas for our offsets. For instance, while we talk about we're trying to get toxic exposure under cover so that we can afford that. But if we spend this now on this, where is the priority? What's the decision? And as far as making sure that we have a time to make sure that our veterans are advised, we have the TAP program. The TAP program, and that's what I said in my testimony. The other bill that's out there, rather than automatically enrolling them and overburdening the VA and overburdening the staff of the VA, and even to the point that we could encourage them, they're hearing it 3 times in the first year after separation, not counting almost a year or 2 years that they can get of training of what to sign up for in the VA while they're at DOD still, so that they know and understand what's available to them. We do need to make sure they're informed. We don't want our veterans not to seek that help. However, there's other things we can do as well. And one thing, and this is not what we're bringing up in this hearing, but a vitally important thing is we could quit turning in our veterans anytime that they get a fiduciary or get a person to give them oversight to the NICS list. There's a whole group of veterans that refuse to go to the VA because we do that, but we refuse to take that legislation up. So there are things we can do to try to prevent suicide and get them in, but we've also got to make sure we don't put those barriers in place.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Let me just ask both of you just on the concept of suicide within the Guard and Reserve. Are there any things that you're looking into on the committee currently about that?
We are, both of us are working together along with our staff to try to find out the ways to make sure that first off, the sad reality is, and understand our last numbers from 2019 went down a very little bit. Okay, they're not at the 20, but they were at the 19, 18 number. But so anyone committing suicide is not acceptable. Okay, but as we look forward, we've got to make sure that we educate, that we make sure that they have the opportunity. But of those 20, only 6 of them have ever actually even been in the VA. So I like the fact that the chairman's trying to move forward with something. It's just we've got to make sure that it is the answers that we need.
Mr. Burgess, if I might respond. So that we know of the 18 or 19 deaths by suicide among veterans a day, that about 3 of them occur among our reservists and our Guard units. This is tragic. I don't know that we fully have a full grasp of why our Guard units and our reservists are vulnerable, but let's just understand that Guard units and reservists are deployed far more than they used to be 30, 40 years ago. As I said in my opening statement, they are not safe havens for people who want to be able to say they served in the military or for whatever reason they might have. I mean, that's what a lot of folks did back in the 60s and the early 70s. We didn't have to contemplate a draft in 2002 when we needed frankly, the personnel that we needed. And that would have been, as you know, all of you know, that would have been a huge political issue as we were trying to pull together the resources, the human resources we needed to keep America safe. And so what do? We turned to the Guard and Reserve, and we changed it from a strategic to an operational reserve and Guard. We therefore also increased the tempo of training. The number of training days increased. We said to Guard and Reservists that you only have to do a few weekends and a week in the summer, a couple weeks in the summer. That's no longer true. Depending on what type of unit you serve and what kind of function you serve, whether you are in a special forces unit, you may be training far more days than most of the public understands. Imagine the kind of stress that adds to a guardsman or a guardswoman, a reservist. Imagine that on top of having to keep a stable employment situation, the financial stresses you may be having, all of the things I'm talking about so far, familial relationships that you have to keep intact. These are all the types of stressors that can lead to a suicidal moment. And so I believe that the least we can do is to recognize that our reservists and our guards, men and women, deserve the same sort of credit for the time they're putting in for readiness. So let's not diminish the time that they're training under federal orders as just training, as just so-called training time. That's the same kind of training that our active duty component is doing, that our active duty men and women are doing. I think it's time for every day to count. And we're not talking about a huge burden here. We're talking about less than $2 billion over 10 years, $1.9 billion. My colleague, the ranking member, I'm so glad that he's going to work with us on toxic exposure, but we've gotten early estimates of what toxic exposure is going to cost us over 10 years. And we're talking over $300 billion. We're talking less than 1% over 10 years of what it's going to cost us for toxics to address making our guardsmen and women and our reservists on parity with our active duty component, because they are doing comparable work. They are doing just as vital a work. It's not just about the time that they spend deployed. It's about the time they also spend preparing to be deployed and being ready. America is going to depend on these reservists and guardsmen no less. In fact, in the future, in fact, I think we're going to depend on them more. And we need the very, very, very best people to be in the Guard and Reserve. And the GI Bill needs to be no less an incentive for them. And we have people who have been in the Guard and Reserve for 10 years and still have not accumulated decent GI Bill benefits. We need the very best, and we need to encourage the guardsmen and women and the reservists themselves to improve themselves, and also be able to give that benefit away to their family if they choose not to use it.
Sure. Well, thank you, and I really, I think we make the point that a hearing on this subject really would be to everyone's benefit. Let me just ask you, Mr. Chicano, because you brought up the transition between Department of Defense and the VA, and of course, back in, when was it, 2006 or 2007, the infamous Building 18 issue out at then Walter Reed Medical Center, people who were housed outside the wire waiting for that transition from DOD to VA. Time took too long, records could be lost. And one of the things that really came to the forefront during that time was the difficulty with getting the interoperability between DOD medical records and VA. At that time, I think it was the VISTA system at the VA. And we've talked about this a lot here in the Rules Committee. Are we any closer to getting that interoperability between the Department of Defense and the VA? I know a big contract a couple of years ago was let out to one of the suppliers. Have we crossed the threshold yet? Are we there?
Well, Mr. Burgess, I wouldn't say that we've crossed the threshold. We are at some very tentative fits and starts in the process. The ranking member has been on the committee almost the same amount of time as I've been on the committee, and we know this has been a bipartisan struggle. I got on the committee facing bipartisan disappointment and anger and disgust at the abandonment and the aborting of an attempt to make the two record systems interoperable. You might have recalled that moment in 2013. Secretary Shulkin announced that he was going to contract with a sole source with Cerner. The initial go live in Spokane during the pandemic did not go as well as we had hoped. Some of this, I believe, is a gap in expectations, that the expectations of the users may be way out of proportion to what is actually deliverable, comparable to what is in even the private sector. But let me say that with the new secretary, he has brought on a new chief information officer, just confirmed by the Senate. We have some issues with the cooperation of the information people, the tech people, with the health folks, and giving clear direction to Cerner. I am cautiously optimistic that we are making some strides, but I'm very cautious. I am very glad that my predecessor, Chairman Rowe, established a subcommittee in the Veterans Affairs Committee to do oversight. I have continued that subcommittee. I've continued to ask for more funding to make sure that we have the staffing. I don't believe that we actually do have enough staffing to do oversight of a very complex topic like information technology. And this is not the only area of the VA that needs attention in terms of oversight of information and technology. So my answer is we've not crossed the threshold. We are doing vigorous oversight with, I think, very strong bipartisan cooperation and interest. I really do appreciate how the majority and the minority have been working together on the oversight process. Both sides ask very tough questions and are giving no leeway to whoever is in charge. So anyway, I wish I could give you a more definitive answer that we've crossed the threshold. I can't say that we have. We haven't, there's the good news, we have not abandoned it. The secretary continues to believe that we have to continue with this contract. He's not said we have to do away with it. There are some members of the committee who think that's what there is to do. I don't sense, the ranking member can speak for himself, I don't sense that he's at that place either. That both of us think that we need to move forward with oversight, and that the secretary has so far, I think, made the right decision to continue. And I'm hopeful that the new CIO is going to make a difference.
Well, it's just so important, and it seems like it's drug out for an absolutely unreasonable period of time. So, and be remiss if we didn't bring it up again one more time in the Rules Committee. And I do just want to point out a December 23rd article that I just looked at before coming into this hearing. We lost 4 guardsmen in Texas in the last several weeks due to suicide. It is a critically important topic, and I hope you will both give it the attention that it absolutely requires. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Mr. Perlmutter here. We'll go back to him later. Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But I don't know if Mr. Perlmutter is there, whether it's appropriate to make fun of him in his absence or not. I wanted to say some
I'm
Want to
present,
say
so say whatever you want to say.
All right, I'm going to go for it then, Mr. Perlmutter. First of all, the people of Colorado have no greater champion or advocate than you, and I've seen you go to bat for the people of Colorado time and time again. Um, Having said that, when Chairman Takano said that you speak truth to power, it's also the case that you speak a lot of nonsense to your seatmates and keep us in stitches all day long. And so you've been a terrible influence on me ever since I first joined the Rules Committee. And as terribly sorry and pained as I am going to be to see you go, if you in fact maintain this bad decision, I will be a far more attentive and effective member of the committee, Mr. Chairman, after he's gone, because I'm going to be able to pay a lot closer attention to what's going on. It's going to be a lot less fun and a lot less exciting around here without Eddie Perlmutter. And but the Congress and the people of Colorado will be losing something if he really goes. So anyway, it's a melancholy day in the Rules Committee because of that. And I just want to say, Chairman Takano, I salute you for your unswerving leadership for veterans and for this great legislation, which we can all take pride in, which is going to make a huge difference in the country right away. So I'm just thrilled to get behind it. I'm going to be very excited to come back to my district to tell people about the new benefits that it's going to make possible. And with that, I'm going to yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rushenthaler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it, and I do just want to have some words with Mr. Perlmutter. He's truly my friend, and I texted him as soon as I found out the news, letting him know how sorry he was leaving. I see he's back on camera, and I got to say, if I said it in a text, I should say it publicly. If everybody had your demeanor, Mr. Perlmutter, and your attitude, this place would just work better. And I think it would be a much more pleasant place to work. I think we get a lot more done. So I know we still have a year to work together. I'm looking forward to it, but you've truly been outstanding with everything you've done. And I got to say, my first rules debate on the floor was with you. And it was heated, but it was nice. It was collegial. And afterward, I believe you came up, gave me a hug. We talked, and I think we walked off the floor together. So I wish more people shared your attitude and demeanor. And I do have to say, I think about you often, largely because every time I fill up a glass of water, I do it from a wedding gift that you gave my wife and me, which is a water dispenser I have on my kitchen counter. So I can't escape not thinking about you every time I go to get a glass of water. And I do have to say, I missed your ski trip this year, but at some point in the future, you and I hopefully will make some turns together out west. We'll have to make it happen.
Can I ask the chairman a question?
Well, yeah. Well, are you done, Mr. Rushenthaler?
I will yield. I'll yield to Mr. Perlmutter. Absolutely.
My question is to the two of you. Is all of this being taped? Can I use this again sometime? I yield back. Miss Fishbach's not laughing, so I'll yield back.
Well, sounds good, Mr. Perlmutter. And then I also have to say, of course, happy birthday to Dawn, and a belated one to Dr. Burgess. So happy birthday to both of you guys. Okay, with that said, I'll get down to business. Ranking Member Boss, do you mind just talking briefly about the Moore substitute? I know it came up, but I don't think we fully went into it. Ranking Member Boss.
Yeah. The Moore substitute is basically, and I want to clear up some things that were questioned and everything like that. As I said, I'm not in a position where I want to not offer these benefits, but we've got to offer these benefits to know and understand that the budget offset still has to be there. We still have to be able to pay for it. We have to be able to pay for it not only in the next 10 years, but 20 years and 30 years and 40 years down the road. And as we were talking, the Moore amendment, basically what it does is it covers everything but that area of the 2 weeks a year and the weekend a month. Those areas where we're already part of the obligation for the Guard and Reserve, knowing that when they signed up to become. And Representative, I know you know that because you've been on both sides of that. And the thing is, I would love to say, oh, yes, let's just open the floodgates up. But we've got other issues that are out there, other issues that are pending, and we've got a fiduciary duty. Now, that fiduciary duty also requires us to try to make sure that we can provide to make sure that the benefits that we can offer are offered to our military personnel. By putting these amendments in, it makes it to where it's affordable, it's palatable to the Senate, it's palatable to others involved, and it still gives those benefits to those veterans and those Guard and Reserve veterans that are out there.
Mr. Boss, Ranking Member Boss, when you're talking about the offsets, are you concerned that with this offset, we are not going to have room to maneuver regarding the veterans who are exposed to toxics?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier, and that is a concern because, you know, the chairman and I are in agreement. We do want to work on toxic exposure. Now, how are we going to pay for that? Those offsets are vitally important, and we need to figure out when we use them, how we can use them, and how we can make sure that we are doing what's best, not only for our Guard, Reserve, but all of our veterans, and we don't deny them other services in the long run. And then also handing off to our children and grandchildren who they themselves may have to serve. I know my grandchild, as I said, is serving, so that we can be wise in what we're doing. And if we're all of a sudden being wise and trying to handle this, it doesn't mean we're not compassionate. It means we're compassionate with the idea and intent that our compassion has common sense of how we can handle this in the future.
And then this is just my 2 cents, but I am concerned about the offset just because increasing the financing fee on the VA loan concerns me because, you know, now spreads this to the entire veteran community, and we want to encourage home ownership, particularly veterans to own a home. So I understand that there's disagreement about how to use this offset. I kind of, I have an issue with just the offset itself, putting everything on the back of all the veterans who are buying homes with VA loan, refinancing with a VA loan. I mean, I would argue that that's not the best offset, but I'll let that be. Could you talk briefly about your thought on how this could impact individuals deciding to make the military a career, either being career officers or career enlisted personnel? Do you have any thoughts on how that could impact those decisions?
Well, one thing is that, quite often our Guard and Reserve decide to move over to full-time rather than being Guard and Reserve. And if we're going to say that all benefits are available to anyone regardless of your status in the military, the idea and intent of the Guard and Reserve was you could tie it with your civilian life. You could do that, and you gave up certain things to do that. Now, as we're trying to keep a peacetime, and I was in the service during peacetime, and it was always a challenge to keep people who were full-time instead of being Guard and Reserve. And I think if one of the draws to them is the fact that there are certain benefits to being an active member of our military.
Well, thank you, Ranking Member Boss. I appreciate it. And I can personally attest to the fact that you are the father of a Marine veteran. He was my instructor at Naval Justice School. Yes, then Major Boss was my instructor, and he was Connor Lamb's instructor as well, I must say. And I can't attest to your grandson, but I know he's one heck of a shot because he beat me at a sporting clays tournament not too long ago. So with that, Ranking Member Boss, I appreciate it. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I saw the gentleman from the Moore amendment. The amendment was submitted. There were some issues. There were some issues that arose that we're trying to see whether we can work out. I'm not sure whether we can or not. If we can, then we're happy to try to make it an order. But we're still in consultation with the parliamentarian. I don't know whether I want to yield to Mr. Perlmutter. If you want to say anything nice about yourself, you can have this opportunity, or I can move on to Ms. Scanlon, but it's up to you.
No, let's move on to Ms. Scanlon, Mr. Bost, and and Mr. Takano have heard enough, and I just thank you all for the kind words.
Ms. Scanlon.
Does this mean I have to say something nice about Representative Perlmutter? I'm not sure if I can bring myself to. No, of course, we are all very, very sorry to hear this. And he has assured me it has nothing to do with the fact that my office put up a much better Christmas decoration display than his did. So, we'll have more to say later, I'm sure. Chairman Takano, thank you so much for bringing this legislation here. I've been particularly interested in the eVest Act. We have so many veterans in our district, in Pennsylvania in general, and this is one of the issues we've heard quite a bit about. Going back several years, there was a veteran, or the father of a veteran named Walter, who every time my office posted about anything, it didn't matter what it was about. It could have been National Hug a Puppy Day. This gentleman would post about veterans and what were we doing to get better care for veterans. And he was particularly focused on the issue of veteran suicide. So we tracked him down and had a conversation with him, and had conversation with a number of our veterans groups. And they said one of the single best things we could do is automatically enroll people for healthcare when they left the service. And so I'm so pleased to see this proposal, which would really advance that. We know from other sectors that having to opt out rather than opt in is what gets people the care that they need, or what gets people to do the savings they need. So I'm really, really excited to see this proposal. And then with respect to the Guard and Reserve Parity Act, we are asking so much of our National Guard these days. I mean, whether it's disaster relief or stepping in as they are, even as we speak, stepping in to work in COVID wards. I think they truly deserve these benefits. It's just as important as housing that we provide them with additional educational benefits. So I'm strongly supportive of both these bills. Is there anything else that you feel needs to be added at this point, Mr. Takano? I think you've laid out the case pretty well.
Well, thank you, Representative Scanlon. Let me just take a moment to address Mr. Reschenthaler's concern about the pay-fors. Under EVEST, of course, there's no mandatory spending, and we see a very modest amount of discretionary spending that has to be considered by appropriations. But very rare do you see a bill scored at zero mandatory spending. So we're seeing, because we're not talking about new eligibilities. These are all service members who are eligible for VA healthcare for the 5 years after they have served. We're just seeking to make sure they have access. And instead of, the service member is often such in a rush to move on with their lives, they may not think very much about enrolling. We should just take that little complication out of their lives. Actually, it's kind of a big one, a big complication. Mm-hmm. Once they find themselves in a place where they have to enroll again, and then deal with a bureaucracy. Better for the bureaucracy just to say you're in, and it's up to you to take yourself out. It's so much better for our ability to offer an array of services to that veteran. We know that the vulnerability to death by suicide is far greater among those veterans who are not connected to the VA. We have a great chance to make sure that more and more of our veterans stay connected to the VA and all of the services that it offers, not just the health services, but everything else. But let me also clear up this issue about the pay-for regarding the interest rate reduction pay-for. And what that is that when veterans want to refinance a loan, they pay a fee on that refinance. They pay currently a fee of 0.5%. We would raise it by 0.35%. I want to say that this proposed rate increase passed the Congress, last Congress, with every Republican vote. It passed on voice, unanimous. Mr. Reschenthaler was not in the Congress at that time, so I can't accuse him of or say that he voted for it. He wasn't here. But this is an example of like, come on, is the pay for controversial? No. It is something we unanimously agreed to in the last Congress. And we're talking $1.9 billion over 10 years compared to the $300+ billion we've got to find for toxic exposure, for the burn pits. Look, the mental health, let's say readiness, which is what this bill is about, and honoring the readiness training that these men and women put in as reservists and guardsmen and guardswomen. Readiness is the training. And we have to recognize that that training is very much the same training that is going on with active duty. And we need to honor that. The financial security and access to high quality prevention and healthcare are also suicide prevention. So there's a suicide prevention component to what we're trying to do with the Parody Act as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Would the gentleman yield?
I think
Or
he,
gentlelady, I'm sorry, Ms. Scanlon.
thank you. Sure, I'll yield.
Thanks. I just want to clarify, Chairman Zakano, look, I'm not a hard no on this. I'm just bringing it up because I think it's something that we should look at to see if there's other options for a pay for. You know, the VA loan is an amazing product. I've used the VA loan. A lot of my friends have used the VA loan. And I think it's one of those things that is a phenomenal benefit to a veteran that he or she can get out and use his VA loan to acquire property. I talk to my MA from Iraq often, usually about once or twice a month, actually. And not a conversation goes by where he's not telling me about how badly he wants to purchase a house. And I know this might just hit refinance loans, but you know, from a 0.5 to a 0.85%, if you get a higher level loan, I mean, that's not chump change. So again, I'm not saying I'm a hard no on this. I was just saying, you know, maybe we should look at other pay fors other than making the VA loan harder. And I can tell you that a lot of people are telling me now, the VA loan in a hot market, you can't even use a VA loan because you can't waive the contingencies on it. And I'm not opposed to the contingencies on a VA loan. I'm just saying that in effect, in a hot market, you can't even, get an offer accepted with a VA loan because no buyer in a hot market is going to want to accept an offer if it's contingent on VA financing when there's other offers that don't have the mandatory contingencies that the VA loan has. So I think we should actually make the VA loan easier and better for veterans, not put additional burdens on it. Again, I'm not a hard no on this. I just think that it's worth discussing. With that, I'll yield back and thank you, Ms. Scanlon, for yielding me. Yep.
Mr. Reschenthaler, let me just say that the CBO found that the 0.35% increase from 0.5 to 0.85% would not impact the usage of the program for such a small fee. We're talking $5 a month on average for the average veteran who is refinancing. And as I said, this rate increase on the IRRL, the IRRLRL, was something that was unanimously agreed upon in the last Congress. And we frequently use this as a pay for as we add additional years on. And so, as I said, and I appreciate that you're not a hard no. I don't think you should be a hard no. As I said, in comparison, the $1.9 billion that this parity bill would cost over 10 years compared to the $300 billion that we need to find for toxic exposure. I mean, to say that we need to preserve this pay for in order to pay for the $300 billion plus, it doesn't make any sense to me. Because why does it make any sense? Because for $1.9 billion, we have to do the right thing by our guards, men and women, and our reservists. We have to do the right thing. And so anyway, I yield back.
Okay, just to redirect one more question with respect to the educational benefits that will be available as a result of this change. I mean, Pennsylvania has one of the worst records in terms of student loans. So whatever we can do to help folks afford college, afford higher education is really, really important. So this has an important impact, doesn't it, on our National Guard members being able to further their education, to develop new skills and be able to progress in their careers?
That's correct, Representative Scanlon. You know, in addition to one of the things we've been working on as a committee and as a Congress, and I'm very proud of the result of what this Congress has achieved in terms of under Chairman Scott. I've worked closely with Chairman Scott under Education and Labor. We've worked to protect the GI Bill from unscrupulous profiteers in the for-profit college world. And we have made it far more difficult for veterans to be targeted by for-profit colleges that are simply in the game to raid the GI Bill, benefits of hundreds of thousands of veterans. It's one of the most disgusting things I've seen our country allow to happen. And this is also going to help low-income and minority non-veterans, women as well. They've often been the target of the very same industry. So that's we have done work to protect the integrity of the GI Bill, to make sure that veterans get good training and get good education. But more than that, it's also about our national security, because our readiness is improved when we have a more highly skilled reservist population, a more highly skilled Guard unit. Think about the kind of things we are going to need our Guardsmen and women to do. It's no less than our active duty service members, who are called upon to be far more technically adept, far more intellectually developed. This is not, military is not a place you go to as a last resort. It is a place that we need the most talented people. And the GI Bill is one of those things that is an important tool for the military for active duty, and we need to make it just as an important tool for our guards, our Guard units, and our reservists.
Okay, thank you. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding back. We want to also wish your staff or Dean a happy birthday as well. A lot of birthdays today. I now turn to Ms. Fischbach.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And once again, Mr. Perlmutter has disappeared. And since Representative Scanlon mentioned it, I just wanted to put in my bid for all of his Christmas decorations. When he packs up all of his boxes, he can send them over to my office. So, because he made quite the splash in the hallway here. But you know, for the most part, my questions regarding the bills were asked and answered, and I do share the concerns about the costs and the budget issues, and I'm disappointed to hear once again that the Republican ideas were basically disregarded by the Democrats. But I did want to just check in with Ranking Member Boss if there's anything that he would like to add.
No, I think we've discussed it to the point that, and the concerns that we have. I just want to make sure that everyone understands, just because we have concerns and we understand that we have to do this into the future does not make us where we don't support our veterans. Anyone that wants to question me in the support of our veterans, I would challenge them to do that with the history of my father or my grandfather, my son and my grandson, as well as my service time. So I appreciate everyone's questions and discussing it, because that's what we needed to do. I think it's something that should have been, that was brought up early on, that we should have went ahead and had the opportunity to discuss this. We had 2 hearings this year that could have been, these 2 bills could have been discussed in committee. They were not, but so be it. Thank you.
And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Morelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Mr. Takano and the ranking member for being here. I I was hoping that Don Sisson's birthday was going to be the most exciting news of the day, and happy birthday to him. But I see Mr. Perlmutter couldn't let a pitch go by without swinging at it, so he's he's unfortunately upset the jovial nature of the day. But I do want to say something. I'll have to play this back from other areas. You know, I haven't missed an opportunity to tease Perlmutter during the 3+ years that I've had the privilege of serving in the House. But and I do want to say one of the reasons I wear it as a badge of honor when people say you're on the Rules Committee. Other members will say you're on the Rules Committee. And why would you do that? And I say it's an amazing committee. I love being on this committee. I love the members, and it's partly because this really is like a family, and I think so highly of the colleagues that I get to serve with. And I have to admit, this is an emotional day for me. It's not only like family, but losing a family member who's not losing in that way, but leaving us. And Mr. Perlmutter always teases me when I say I'm an old school legislator. He says, yeah, from about the 17th century. But I'm old school in this way. I think in the transactional world in which we live, I've always felt that relationships are the most important thing about what we do. And Ed Perlmutter has been an amazing relationship for me. He really has taken me under his wing in the 3+ years. I don't blame him for anything I do, but I give him a lot of credit for taking a new member under his wing, as I think he does for so many members. I don't know where he gets the time or energy, but I'll have more to say, I'm sure. So Ed, you're not going to get away with it. But this is an emotional day for me. I'm one of my dearest friends in the House, and while the House will go on, it's going to be a less fun place, that's for sure. Mr. Rankin, Mr. Askin talked about that in our little text string, which sometimes is distracting, but always fun and interesting. And so I'm going to pass on questions for Mr. Tucano. I have some, but I'll take them offline, but wanted to make sure that I acknowledged and thanked Mr. Perlmutter for all he's done, not only for the country, but for the House and for the institution that's the Rules Committee. So God bless.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeSaulnier.
Mr. Chairman, I'm inconsolable about the news about Mr. Perlmutter leaving, so I can barely speak. But I do want to say happy birthday to Don. And it is interesting that Ed's notice and Don's birthday, since they both show the same kind of respect towards many of us that we probably richly deserve. But I'm going to miss you a lot, Ed. And California is coming to Colorado on October 15th to beat them. So I hope I am invited to be there with you. I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield for one moment?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Mr. Raskin, if it's directed at Mr. Perlmutter.
Well, but it certainly is, because but I just learned that this whole announcement that Mr. Perlmutter's made was a desperate effort to obscure the reality of Don Sisson's birthday. And I didn't realize that it was just an effort to derail somebody else getting a little bit of attention in the Rules Committee. But I did want to say a word about Don Sisson. Happy birthday to Don, who's just a magnificent chief of staff. And he is a true gentleman in the old school sense, and a scholar of Congress, and somebody who gives a lot of luminous direction to our committee. So thank you for allowing me to say that, Mr. DeSaulnier. And I hope, Mr. Perlmutter, you'll be able to correct the error at our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raskin. Mr. Chairman, let me let you know that this item about Ed leaving has been referred to the subcommittee, the Rules Committee, referred to as FOE, Friends of Ed. So anybody who wants to join that and act with us appropriately is hereby noticed. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I too want to wish Don a very happy birthday. I'm so sorry that he has to spend it with us as opposed to with his family and his loved ones, but consider us part of your family. And to Mr. Perlmutter, so much has been said, but as one of the members of the women's softball team, I want to thank him for getting up early and joining us, in addition to the men's baseball team, and for helping me improve my lefty arm very, very early in practice. And so he's been a mentor to me in more than one way, and I really, really appreciate everything that he's done. But we've got plenty of time to celebrate him, including next spring at the women's softball game when we're going to win. We're going to win. So, but to the matter at hand, we owe a debt of gratitude to our veterans, and they deserve Gold Star access to benefits that they've earned. The bills we're discussing today provide that access with respect to health care and education, and they have my full support. HR 4673, the eVest Act, and HR 1836, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parody Act, focus on veterans during the most vulnerable and pivotal moments as they transition from active duty to new stages in their lives. Troubling reports have found that many transitioning veterans are not aware of the health benefits available to them through the VA. HR 4673 helps close this gap through automatic enrollment of newly transitioned service members in the VA healthcare system, as we've discussed this afternoon. And as we consider ways to help transitioning veterans, the mental health struggles they disproportionately face are top of mind. That's why I, along with Congresswoman Gonzalez-Colon, Congresswoman Moore, Congressman Bowman, have offered an amendment to HR 1836 that will require the VA to notify transitioning service members of the services for which they are eligible, including mental health care, community care under the Mission Act, and care related to military sexual trauma. My father was a psychiatrist in the Air Force during the Vietnam era. He knew then, and we know now, that left unaddressed, military health issues can be debilitating and deadly. A recent Department of Defense Office of Inspector General report found that the DoD has systematically failed to provide proper mental health screening and care for transitioning veterans, in part because so many veterans don't understand what care is available to them. Mental health resources at the VA can only be helpful to those who know of their existence. We must do everything we can to make it easier for veterans to access their well-deserved and much-needed health care benefits. I also support the work this bill does to expand veterans' access to education benefits. With education comes opportunity, and we owe these opportunities to the thousands of veterans who are currently unable to receive education benefits simply because of their National Guard and Reserve status. These service members face risks each and every day, just like their qualifying counterparts, and it's past time that we close this disparity by updating the eligibility parameters of the post-9/11 GI Bill. I'm grateful for the opportunity to support the nearly 650,000 veterans in North Carolina. Both pieces of legislation we're discussing today take important steps to improving resources for our veterans. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Does any other member of the committee wish to ask a question? If not, I would like to thank our witnesses for their testimony, and you are now excused.
Thank you.
Are there any other members who wish to testify on HR 1836 and HR 4673? Seeing none, this closes the hearing on HR 1836 and HR 4673. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion from the distinguished gentlewoman from California, Mrs. Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee report a structure rule for consideration of HR 1836, the Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parody Act of 2021. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate on the bill, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee of Veterans Affairs or their designees. The rule provides all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 117-25 shall be considered as adopted and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule provides all points of order against provisions in the bill amended. The rule makes in order only those amendments printed in Part A of the Rules Committee report, which further amendment printed in Part A of the Rules Committee reports shall be considered only in the order printed in the report and may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, may be withdrawn by the proponent at any time before the question is put thereon, shall not be subject to amendment and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in Part A of the report. The rule provides 1 motion to recommit. The rule provides a consideration of HR 4673, the EVS Act, under a structure rule. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate on the bill, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Veterans Affairs or their designees. The rule provides all points of order against consideration of the bill, and the rule provides that an amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 117-26 shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amendment shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule provides that the following debate each further amendment printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report not earlier considered as part of the amendments en bloc pursuant to Section 5 shall be considered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, may be withdrawn by the proponent at any time before the question is put thereon, and shall not be subject to amendment and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. Section 5 of the rule provides that at any time after debate of the chair of the Committee of Veterans Affairs or his designee may offer amendments en bloc consisting of further amendments printed in Part B of the Rules Committee report not earlier disposed of. Amendments en bloc shall be considered as read and shall be debatable for 20 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Veterans Affairs or their designees, shall not be subject to amendment and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in Part B of the report and amendments en bloc described in Section 5 of the resolution. The rule provides 1 motion to recommit. Finally, the rule provides the House Resolution 188 agreed to March 8, 2021 is amended by striking January 21, 2022, each place it appears, and inserting February 4th, 2022.
You've heard the motion from the gentlewoman from California. Is there any amendment or discussion? Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move that the committee strike the language in the rule that would continue the tolling of days for resolutions of inquiry. Mr. Chairman, it's now been exactly 600 days since members of the House have been prevented from exercising their legitimate oversight prerogatives through the use of resolutions of inquiry. This is the 9th time Republicans have offered this motion because the majority believes that this is not the right time. Well, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, with the start of the second session, I think it's fair to question whether there will ever be a right time in the majority's eyes. Unfortunately, the trend says no. The sustained aggressive procedures employed by Speaker Pelosi have shown her intent to control the House, silence dissent, and avoid dealing with anything that she deems as inconvenient. Well, I'm sorry that legitimate oversight of the Biden administration is inconvenient, but it's a tool that has existed since almost the founding of the Republic. One of the first recorded uses dates back to 1797, and it's been part of the House rules since 1820. As chairman, sometimes tough questions need to be asked to ensure proper oversight can be conducted, and continuing to silence not only the minority, but all members of this body does an extreme disservice to the institution. I know that you want to do better than that. We've had good discussions about that, but this would be a good place, in my view, to start. So I urge the adoption of my motion and yield back.
Heard the gentleman's amendment. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, Burgess here.
Yep, go ahead.
And this is so important that Mr. Cole, Ranking Member Cole, has brought up. We've used the resolution of inquiry in the past when Republicans have been in the minority, and Democrats when they were in the minority. I remember Joe Kennedy used the resolution of inquiry quite effectively in the Energy and Commerce Committee. So it is a tool that is being denied right now, and there's no reason. Mr. Cole is exactly correct. Whatever reasons may have existed, we've long since learned how to compensate for those. So the speaker should relinquish the stranglehold on the institution and allow us to do our work. And if we've got legitimate questions, they should be able to be brought forward. And I thank the chairman and thank Mr. Cole for bringing this up. And I yield back.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, it's Reschenthaler.
Go ahead, Mr. Reschenthaler.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. I just want to associate my remarks with Ranking Member Coles and with Dr. Burgess and support this motion. Yeah, I don't think this should be a partisan issue. I think it's just for the integrity of our institutional body, and for that, because of that, I support the amendment. And thank you for the ranking member for making the motion. I yield back.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, Fishbach?
Yeah. Yes, Ms. Fishbach, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to speak in support of the ranking member's motion. This is so important because I have found in my year here that letters to agencies go unanswered, even letters on the record go unanswered, and I think that this will really assist us in being able to do our job of oversight of those agencies. So I fully support the ranking member's motion, and I yield back.
Well, let me just say that I don't think there's any excuse for any member not to get their request answered by any agency or department in this administration or any administration. And we have been trying in the Rules Committee, as you know, to bring cabinet level heads to the committee so that people could actually have one-on-one conversations with them to follow up on some of the issues that they have. Let me just say, in terms of what the amendment gets at, I'm actually sympathetic to this, but I will tell you, I'm just going to be very honest with you. I've talked to a lot of members, and I think I've had some conversations with Mr. Cole about this, where there is a question of whether or not this would be pursued legitimately to get questions answered, or whether it will be used as another weapon to delay and obstruct. We have lots of members on your side who have made it very clear that they want to obstruct the agenda. They want to slow things down, as evidenced by the fact that we have constant and regular votes on non-controversial items, including Republican bills that where there should be no Republican objection on. So we're still working on this, but I will tell you that there's a feeling here that this is not about the legitimate inquiries to find out information that is relevant to the work that we do up here. That there is a feeling that during this pandemic, it is just going to be utilized as a tool to derail our ability to get our work done here. I hope that that's not the case. I'm not saying it is the case. I'm just saying that these are some of the things that we need to deal with. This is an ongoing discussion, but at this particular time, I would urge a no vote. And with that, the vote is on the Cole amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. No.
Aye.
No.
The chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, on that, I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Torres.
No.
Mrs. Torres, no. Mr. Perlmutter.
No.
Mr. Perlmutter, no. Mr. Raskin.
No.
Mr. Raskin, no. Miss Scanlon.
No.
Miss Scanlon, no. Mr. Morelli.
Mr. Morelli is no.
Mr. Morelli, no. Mr. DeSaulnier. Miss Ross.
No.
Miss Ross, no. Mr. Neguse. Mr. Cole.
Aye.
Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Burgess.
Aye.
Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Rushenthaler.
Aye.
Mr. Rushenthaler, aye. Mrs. Fishbach.
Aye.
Mrs. Fishbach, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Can I ask, how is Mr. DeSaulnier recorded?
Mr. DeSaulnier is not recorded.
Mr. DeSaulnier. I don't- Mr. DeSaulnier, you're not recorded.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I am an aye.
No,
I'm sorry, it's the amendment. I'm a no.
thank you. Okay, all right.
DeSaulnier, no.
Clerk, report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
Amendment is not agreed to. Further amendments.
Mr. Chairman, Michelle Fishbach has
Ms.
an
Fishbach,
amendment.
go ahead. Ms. Fishbach.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move that the committee make an order amendment number 3 offered by Mr. Fitzgerald of Wisconsin. This amendment would ensure members of the armed forces granted a general discharge under honorable conditions solely for refusing the COVID-19 vaccine are eligible for GI Bill education benefits. Despite being challenged in court, the Department of Defense has proceeded with discharging those who otherwise served honorably in defense of our nation solely due to their vaccination status. In an effort to prevent those who have refused the vaccine from being dishonorably discharged, Congress included a provision in the fiscal year 2022 NDAA limiting discharges for failure to receive the COVID-19 vaccine to either an honorable discharge or a general discharge under honorable conditions. However, there will now be a group of veterans who have served honorably up until the point of refusing the COVID-19 vaccination, who will have their education benefits denied and their service record diminished. Mr. Chairman, those who otherwise fought honorably to defend our country should not be deprived of the benefits simply for refusing to comply with the vaccine mandate. While some of my colleagues may disagree with this amendment, it certainly deserves the debate on the floor of the House. I urge support of my motion and the underlying amendment, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you very much. And let me just say, as the gentlewoman knows, that in this amendment that she is proposing, the protections are already in place as part of the NDAA that just became law. And unfortunately, there is a budget point of order against this particular amendment. And as everybody knows, we try to be we are very strict and not allowing amendments in order that where there are points of order against them. I should also say that as part of this bill, we spent this entire rules meeting working with the minority, trying to make sure that the substitute was in order. That had to undergo a couple of revisions, but we get to the point where we were able to make it in order so that there were no points of order against it. So I'm happy to be able to report that we did that. But on this, there is a budget point of order against it, and therefore I would urge a no vote. With that, anybody else have any? If not, the vote is on the Fishbach amendment. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. No.
No.
No.
Chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chair, I would request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Torres.
No.
Mrs. Torres, no. Mr. Perlmutter.
No.
Mr. Perlmutter, no. Mr. Raskin.
No.
Mr. Raskin, no. Miss Scanlon.
No.
Miss Scanlon, no. Mr. Morelli.
Mr. Morelli is no.
Mr. Morelli, no. Mr. DeSaulnier.
No.
Mr. DeSaulnier, no. Miss Ross.
No.
Miss Ross, no. Mr. Neguse. Mr. Cole.
Aye.
Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Burgess.
Aye.
Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Rushenthaler.
Aye.
Mr. Rushenthaler, aye. Mrs. Fishbach.
Aye.
Mrs. Fishbach, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
Amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendment or discussion? Hearing none, the question is now on the motion offered by the gentlewoman from California. All those in favor will say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
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 Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
On that, Mr. Chairman, I'd request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Torres.
Aye.
Mrs. Torres, aye. Mr. Perlmutter.
Aye.
Mr. Perlmutter, aye. Mr. Raskin.
Aye.
Mr. Raskin, aye. Ms. Scanlon.
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Morelli.
Mr. Morelli is aye.
Mr. Morelli, aye. Mr. DeSaulnier.
Aye.
Mr. DeSaulnier, aye. Ms. Ross.
Aye.
Ms. Ross, aye. Mr. Neguse. Mr. Cole.
No.
Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Burgess.
No.
Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Reschenthaler.
No.
Mr. Reschenthaler, no. Mrs. Fishbach.
No.
Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk report the total.
8 yeas, 4 nays.
The motion is agreed to, and accordingly, the gentleman from Colorado, the man of the hour, Mr. Perlmutter, will carry this for the majority.
Well, Mr. Chairman, since Mr. Reschenthaler's first experience on this committee was with Mr. Perlmutter on the floor, I think we should pair them again. So Mr. Reschenthaler will handle for the Republicans.
So Mr. Reschenthaler and Mr. Perlmutter will be handling this on the floor. So I appreciate everybody's patience during the hearing today, and there is no other business. We may have to meet again this week, and I will, as soon as I know for certain, I will let everybody know. But at this time, we have no other business, and so without objection, the committee is adjourned.